Well, we got a fascinating guest, and I think you're going to find his story to be equally fascinating. Member of the Worldwide Church of God, and well, here's a gentleman who pastored within that organization for about 28 years, born in Germany, but not the case today. So Felix Heinberg is with us today. And Felix, before I give your resume, I think it's your story, so I'm going to let you tell it. Nice to have you with us.
Perry, I'm just thrilled to be on the air with you today. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, it's great. Well, thank you for being with us. Well, listen, you were born in Germany. You were raised as a Lutheran. Is that correct?
You're correct.
Okay. And then at the age of 19, you were baptized in the Worldwide Church of God. How'd that happen?
Well, I was, when I was a child and a teenager, I lived in an environment that was very negative. My parents bickered a tremendous amount, and I had some health issues. I was asthmatic. I had some allergy issues, and I think I was very vulnerable. So when I got to be about age 15, 16, I happened to have a friend in school who was a follower of the Radio Church of God, headed by Herbert W. Armstrong.
Right.
I began to be receptive to what he had to share, the literature, the broadcast, which was called The World Tomorrow. We began to listen to the broadcast together. One thing led to another. I began to study their literature and got hooked, and like so many other individuals. And of course, there's a good news and bad news aspect to that. As you're aware, Perry, the Worldwide Church of God was a cult, but went through a tremendous, unprecedented transformation from law to grace over the course of about 7 years. And I happen to be also the beneficiary of those reforms. So it's a rather long story, and sometimes hard to know exactly where to begin and where to end. But the current Worldwide Church of God is no longer a cult and no longer has that name. It's currently called Grace Communion International.
Wow.
But that's right, because grace has become such a central feature and aspect of that denomination. But it didn't happen overnight. It was a long process. It began after the death of Herbert W. Armstrong, who incidentally got his start in the ministry in Oregon. He was part of the leadership.
Don't blame us for that.
Well, you know, it's whether it's a blame or credit, it wasn't all negative.
Yeah.
It's really a credit to the grace of God and his goodness and what he can do. So often, in spite of our human errors and foibles and weaknesses and vulnerabilities, it's just amazing what he is able to do. So it's really a story I believe that God wanted to be told. And because Dr. Ruth Tucker, who wrote an article about this historic reformation in the Worldwide Church of God, said that such a thing had never happened in all of church history. It was unprecedented. So apparently, our loving Lord and the head of the church, Jesus Christ, wanted to have that story to be told. Yeah. And I'm just delighted, Perry, to be able to be with you in the studio, or at least through this technology, to be able to share some of those details.
Well, let's go back a little bit, Felix. How big did the Worldwide Church of God get? Because it was very influential. It was all over television. At one time, it was really booming.
In its heyday, Perry, we had about 150,000 members worldwide, hundreds of congregations. Early on, it was called the Radio Church of God. In fact, the first broadcast by Herbert W. Armstrong was on station KORE. And I can't remember whether that was a station in Eugene, Oregon, or in Portland, Oregon.
I think Eugene. Yeah.
Eugene, okay, KORE. And initially it was a radio type of ministry, but eventually it grew to worldwide proportions and attracted quite a few talented individuals. It was a very compelling message. And like so many cults, much of the strength and the growth derived from or came from the charismatic personality at the head, who happened to be, for most of that period, Herbert W. Armstrong.
Well, what was that core message? What was it that you preached all those years as a pastor?
The core message was, there was a very prophetic component to that. It was the message that we claimed that Jesus brought, and it was a message not so much about Jesus. In fact, we were kind of a little bit apologetic about Jesus, and we shunned all of this Jesus talk and Jesus stuff, Jesus stuff, as we would refer to it. Mm-hmm. We looked down upon other churches. The core message was really a prophetic message about the wonderful world tomorrow, the future, the coming of Jesus Christ. And we saw our ministry as providing or giving a warning message to the world about imminent disaster, the great tribulation, the return of Jesus Christ. And so that was really a gospel. It was not a gospel that centered on the personage of Jesus Christ and the relationship with him. But we claimed it was the prophetic message that Jesus brought. And we saw that as being something future and more or less a warning message.
A little bit of a fear message? I mean, were you selling fear?
Very much so. You know, flee from the wrath to come, the great tribulation. Herbert Armstrong set dates. We had a booklet called 1972 in Prophecy. And when those prophecies were unfulfilled by that time, then he kept pushing the fulfillment another 3 to 7 years ahead.
Did you ever in your heart feel something was going wrong here?
In retrospect, yes, but people who are caught up in cults, you know, they're very powerful forces, and I would just hope and pray that some of the members of your listening audience would benefit from what I had to go through. You know, things not to do. It's so easy when you're vulnerable, when you're confused, as I was. I had physical problems, I had family issues and problems. Then to be caught up in something that had an aura of excitement associated to it, and also this kind of esoteric exclusivist message that we were the only true church. We're the only ones that understood certain things, and so we kind of thrived on the feeling of being unique and special.
Wow. What was your daily life like? I mean, it seemed like you were preaching something that was hard to live.
Well, the daily life focused around, centered upon the teachings of the Old Testament. It was, you know, the requirement of keeping the Sabbath. We also emphasized the need to keep the annual festivals, the Feast of Tabernacles, the Day of Pentecost, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement. In fact, the first and second Feast of Tabernacles and the original Church of God, headed by Herbert Armstrong, were held. I think the first one was in Seigler Springs, Oregon, and the second one in Klamath Falls, not far from Medford, where you are. Mm-hmm. So the yearly calendar really centered around the holy days, and so we were always looking forward to and preparing for the next holy day. And each of the holy days or festivals, we believed, pictured a major step in God's plan. We did not see it, as we should have, as symbolizing or foreshadowing Jesus Christ. But we saw them as more or less major events in the plan of God from beginning to end.
When did things begin to change for you and Connie, and when did you guys decide to get out?
Well, the change really began. The catalyst for leaving the Worldwide Church of God began in 1987 after the death of Herbert W. Armstrong. There were actually two scholars, or maybe they were professors from the church-supported university, Ambassador University in California, who challenged some of the teachings and by presenting papers. And the initial challenges were relatively benign, having to do with the chronology of the Passover. But one thing led to another. There was a tremendous domino effect. It would take a long time to actually give you all of the details. But in a nutshell, there was a domino effect. One change led to another, And all of those basic building blocks, centering around the law and the various practices, they fell one by one. We had about 90 different booklets that were taken out of print. And it was over the course of 7 years that these reforms occurred. Predictably, the money began to dry up. A lot of individuals were upset by the changes. They resisted the changes. And for many of us who accepted, it was really a growth process. God was very gracious to me personally in opening up my mind early on to the truthfulness of the changes, the need for the changes. Explain to me those changes, the teachings of the centrality of Jesus Christ, the true gospel, what a personal relationship with Jesus means. I began to grow in the appreciation of that teaching and began to be set free from the burdens of the legalism of the past. And so it was a 7-year process. Predictably, the money began to dry up in the denomination, and about sometime during the early 90s, the church leaders, a new hierarchy of leadership, began to ask for volunteers for people to transition out of full-time ministry because they could no longer afford to pay their salaries.
Right, right.
And so I was at a point where I just felt in my heart of hearts I had done my job. I was at that time pastoring the largest congregation in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for the Worldwide Church of God. I had been privileged to teach the new teachings, the truth, to the members of the congregation. And again, as I mentioned already, not everyone accepted and welcomed that teaching, but many of them did, thankfully. And I was in a position to make that change. I've been able to earn a master's degree from a major state university in the early 90s, and I felt that I could get gainful employment, maybe better than some of my colleagues. And so I was ready for the change. I was frankly a little bit tired and burned out, having been in kind of a spiritual warfare situation for a number of years. And so then I transitioned out, and I resigned my position in 1996.
Wow. Now, didn't Herbert W. Armstrong's son get involved in this transformation too?
Not at all. In fact, he had been kicked out of the church.
Oh, okay.
A number of years prior. There were moral issues and moral problems. I think he was rebaptized about 3 or 4 times. He's now deceased.
Okay.
But he was actually the successor to his father on radio and television for a number of years. But very sadly, he couldn't live the kind of example in his personal life that was worthy of the position that he held.
So have you reached back in now and helped others out into this transformation?
You know, as God has opened up the doors, it's an honor and privilege to be able to share my story, both personally, one-on-one, and in any social context. You know, I've been privileged to, I was privileged by, I think, a gift from God to be able to go to work for Gene Getz. You know, I was in the business world for about 14 years after resigning from the ministry, and God has always blessed me, Perry, with wonderful jobs. I was director of research for a company. It was a testing company. The second day on the job there, they sent me to Windsor, England to be part of a workshop. And for the most part, I ended up being a recruiter for a national industrial distribution corporation that providentially ended up and has ended up and continues to underwrite and support my salary in going to and working for Dr. Gene Getz here at the Center for Church Renewal. You cannot engineer that. You know, how do you get a secular company, an industrial distribution company, to go ahead and fund an entire salary gratis with no strings attached to work for a ministry like the Center for Church Renewal and I think the best boss in the world, Dr. Gene Getz. It's just a remarkable opportunity. And so through this ministry, the Center for Church Renewal, which now is centering around the distribution of the Life Essential Study Bible, I have the wonderful opportunity to introduce Gene and and share various aspects of his ministry, which is international in scope. And but now centers around this remarkable new publication, the Life Essential Study Bible. which of course I happen to have right here in my hand. Very attractive, very attractive.
I got that very one. I was in it last night. I can't get out of the book of Nehemiah. I'm reading having Gene pop up on all of the Nehemiah prayer. It's just wonderful. Well,
you know, Perry, one of the things that principles do, principles help establish relevance. And so what you're going to find, as I've found, and that is that parts of the Bible that people tend to shun and avoid because they think that they're not so relevant, all of a sudden through this Life Essential Study Bible, come to life.
Yeah, no question about it. You baptized early, you had Jesus in your head, not necessarily in your heart, and somewhere in this transformation you understood grace.
Yeah, I didn't have the kind of dramatic awakening that some people experience. I think it was really a matter of gradual growth in grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. God was merciful to us, of course, I think because he recognized the intent of our heart, even when we were in ignorance. But I saw a wonderful movie that was shown during a ministers' conference in Tulsa, Oklahoma, back in the early 90s that really impacted my heart to the point I wept after I saw that. Saw Bruce Marciano in the Matthew series, and through this video showing this actor, Bruce Marciano, through that depiction of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, I could not keep the tears from coming from my eyes. It really touched my heart, and I think elevated my relationship with Jesus Christ to just new heights, and it was a wonderful thing. I hope I've answered your question.
Well, you have. It's just a fascinating story how God has kept his hand on you, even in your, I guess we could call it ignorance, up to where you are today, and how he's using you with Dr. Getz, and then, of course, your own story. Just remarkable. And I want to say thanks for being with us. It's now, the church name has changed from what to what again?
Well, it was called the Worldwide Church of God, and it was headquartered in Pasadena, California. Now it's headquartered in Glendora, California. The leaders of that church are great friends of mine. I have them plugged into my cell phone. I visited them, but they're truly new covenant denomination now is.
Okay. Again, we apologize for a little bit of a connection there with him. His name is Felix Heinberg, and you may want to check him out with Dr. Gene Getz, and that is the Center for Church Renewal. You can look that up and take advantage of all of the resources they have there, including the Life Essential Bible. I'm kind of high on it because I'm enjoying it. So anyway, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.